So whether you've lived here for years or you're thinking about relocating, the decision between Minneapolis and Saint Paul can be a tough one. They're two awesome cities, really close together, but they're very different in a lot of ways, and they also share a lot of similarities. So let's get into it. Before we do, if you're thinking about making a move, whether it's buying or selling, I'd love to sit down with you, have a conversation about that, and see if we'd be a good fit. My information is in the description below, so please reach out and we'll set up a time to talk. Each city has its own dedicated fan base. Some people in Minneapolis think of Saint Paul as this sleepy suburb, and a lot of folks in Saint Paul are so dyed-in-the-wool they won't consider a move to Minneapolis if their life depended on it. Those are probably the extremes. Most people in each city can love and appreciate different things in both cities, and would consider both of them, depending on their situation. Overall, I would describe Minneapolis as trendy, lively, energetic, where Saint Paul's a little more quiet, established, and mature. Because of the big differences in kind of the vibes and the energy of the city, there's this expression that you date Minneapolis and you marry St. Paul. This isn't for everybody. People, spend their whole lives in both cities, so it just kind of depends on the person, but a lot of people like to spend their time in both cities, and so it's great to kind of get a flavor of the two and compare them. Let's talk about the cities themselves. St. Paul was established first in 1854, and then later in 1867, Minneapolis was established. Minneapolis is the larger of the two cities by population. It has about 425,000 people, whereas St. Paul has 307,000. They're both physically large cities. Minneapolis has over 57 square miles, and St. Paul has over 56 square miles. So because of these large sizes, you can be on one end of the city from the other and really experience a different vibe, and each one has different nooks and crannies in the neighborhood, so it's fun to go explore both. It's a very different feel in each part of the city, so there's a lot to take in and kind of figure out where your spot is. The median home price in Minneapolis is $330,000 and St. Paul is $280,000. So on paper, St. Paul is the more affordable city, but when you really take a look at it, there's going to be differences in taxes between the two cities, and neighborhoods are going to be very different. So it really kind of depends, neighborhood by neighborhood, house by house, to run the numbers and see what one area offers over the other for a given dollar amount of the home value. So if we look at things like nightlife, Minneapolis generally has a more developed nightlife than St. Paul does. There are more theaters and concert venues in Minneapolis. Minneapolis has the famous First Avenue, and they also have the larger concert venues like the Target Center. St. Paul is not to be left out, though. They've got awesome venues like the Palace Theater and the Fitzgerald Theater, and as well as the Excel Center for some larger concerts. And so just different options in each city, but Minneapolis has a few more. The two downtowns are very different. You can go to dinner, drinks, stay out late in Minneapolis, no problem. St. Paul, it's more of a business center, and so often, a lot of the places close down around 5 when the offices close. That's not to say that there aren't restaurants open later, but there's going to be a lot more activity in Minneapolis downtown at night than there is in St. Paul downtown. Both cities have an awesome restaurant scene. Minneapolis has been around a bit longer, but St. Paul is not to be left in the dust. There are options from fine dining to hole-in-the-wall dive bars you can explore, and so lots of different options in both cities. One of the great things about, the cities being right next to each other is that if you live in one, you can always go explore restaurants in the other city and vice versa, and people are really going to go back and forth depending on what they're in the mood for. When it comes to the art scene, I really do think Minneapolis has St. Paul beat. Minneapolis has the Walker Art Center, which is home to the famous Sculpture Garden, the MIA, which is a free museum for anyone to come check that out, and then Art-A-Whirl, which is a huge outdoor open studio crawl that happens every year, and it's really a sight to be seen. Personally, one of my favorite things about living here is all of the options we have for getting outdoors. So each city has its own outdoor attraction. Both have tons of parks. Minneapolis has the chain of lakes, which is Bedé-Makaska, Lake Harriet, Lake of the Isles, and Cedar Lake, which is great to explore, run, bike, whatever, and as well as Minnehaha Creek. So that's a big draw for Minneapolis. There's tons of parks in St. Paul too. You've got Battle Creek Regional Park and Como Park. There's lakes in St. Paul too, like Como Lake and Lake Phelan, but they're more spread apart. So, in Minneapolis, you can kind of explore this like grouping of outdoor stuff, but in St. Paul, you kind of have to drive to these different areas. One of the advantages of it being spread out in St. Paul is it's a little more evenly distributed throughout the city. So if you're living in any given neighborhood, there's something nearby you can get to. In Minneapolis, with such a concentration, it's kind of that one part of Southwest Minneapolis that has all the action. So it kind of is a give and take. Lastly, let's talk tax base. Minneapolis has a higher tax base, And so that lends itself to a lot better public services. We're going to see more bike lanes, better roads in Minneapolis. The parks, they're always investing money into the park system, so that's really great. We see lots of new things coming up that way. Both are crowded cities with lots of on-street parking, so clearing snow after storms is an issue for sure, but it seems like Minneapolis's get cleared a lot faster and better than St. Paul's. It's kind of a joke in St. Paul that, the roads will get cleared when they get cleared, whereas Minneapolis, it seems like it's a little more efficient in that way. Whichever city is the better fit for you from the things it has to offer, there's such a diverse range of beautiful neighborhoods to check out and different price ranges, so it's really worth getting into, exploring both, and just finding a nook that makes sense for you and settling down there. If you ever want to chat with someone about all the different nooks and crannies of Minneapolis, St. Paul, I'm very familiar with both cities. I'd love to chat with you about that, even take you around, drive around, look at some different areas. My contact information is below in the description, so reach out and let's set that up.